The shattered agency begins to hide the unleashed horror. She begins to understand her newfound freedom. A gas station closes in the wake of calamity. Welcome to Hidden Oaks. The road went from rough to smooth, and the noise and vibrations of the car relinquished some of their tension. Neither person had said a word during their 2-hour return drive. They were nearly back to headquarters. With the help of the rest of her team, Mira hoped she might salvage some fraction of her otherwise futile day. The sun blared in, not yet at blinding eye level, but uncomfortable all the same. The dark sunglasses helped, but with each slight curve of the road, sunbeams managed to find another gap to sneak through or another shiny surface to glare from. At least the air conditioning was doing its job of keeping the heat at bay. Mira remembered Agent Thane specifically tuning all of the company cars to keep running on the old, good kind of Freon, the kind that poked holes in the ozone layer but kept a person nice and cool. CFCs or HFCs, one had replaced the other, but Mira couldn't remember which. Another part of her brain was busy attempting to solve the problem of what had gone wrong. What had caused the waste of an entire day, not only of hers but of her rising star field agent as well. Even if her lead had panned out, she could have gone alone or taken somebody else. Was she repeating mistakes? Was she becoming too reliant on and too trusting of Agent Wilker? No, she told herself. Trust was the only hope of holding the unit together. These and half a dozen other threads of thought all wound around through Mira's mind at once. None of them immune to doubts, none safe from the frustration of failure and the nagging anxiety of being away from her post during such sketchy times, even just for a day. One of her more straightforward lines of thinking reached its conclusion and was ready to find out what Agent Wilker thought.
Well, that was an utter waste of time. I should have pressed Agent Friedman about his sources.
I guess, but if it had been true, What the hell, Jay?
Agent Duncan?
The park.
What?
We have to get to the park now. We have to stop them.
What happened to your leg? I mean, Stop who?
Everyone. I think anyway. Commander, we need...
We're going. Slow down. We need to stop everyone? You think? Stop them from what exactly?
There was an order from Alpha Division. Only it wasn't. It's a fake. Something seems to be off in the header. So I ran the signature through my own program, and it doesn't match. Someone copied the checksum from a different message, and our messaging system apparently doesn't authenticate anything received from a certain range
Agent Duncan, take a breath. Agent Wilker, do we have any more water?
Oh, right.
What did this forged order say?
That containment has failed, and to immediately gear up and move out to the park for an assault on a number 17.
Oh, shit.
That's the one, isn't it? The dangerous thing living in the park. The thing that sent some other thing to take my leg.
That's my working theory.
Anyway, what was it? The mutiny you talked to us about? This is it. The message said that Order Zero was now superseded or rescinded, or something.
And you're saying everyone went?
I don't know for sure. I got trapped. There was no one else in the lab.
How the hell did you get trapped?
They activated lockdown, didn't they? Cut power and sealed every section on the way out? How did you examine the message?
I was going to ask how you got out, but...
I had my laptop. It's kind of a long story. Oh, that was the other thing. The name on the message was Crispin. I don't know if that makes things better or worse.
Unfortunately, neither do I. It makes things more complicated. Agent Crispin was killed right in front of me 11 years ago by agents from Alpha Division. When rumors started surfacing that he was back, I didn't put enough stock in them. He was, or is, Very clever. Always had a habit of dodging proper channels and picking at boundaries. Not altogether unlike you, Agent Duncan.
I'm guessing that's not a compliment.
It is, actually. We need people like that. People who will push past the edges. To a point, anyway. I made the same mistake back then that I made today. I trusted that at worst he was a busybody, a pot stirrer. But as Alpha found out, he was pulling a lot of strings. If only...
What the?
The trio arrived at Hidden Oaks Park, but could plainly see that they were too late to prevent any catastrophe. Twisted wreckage, both mechanical and human, littered the street. The ground bore a huge scar, an elongated crater from which a pocket of fire smoldered, and a thick mass of acrid smoke poured upward into the wind. The sewer system had suffered a catastrophic breach, out of sight but stinging to the eyes nonetheless. A line of ruin resembling the path of a tornado led from inside the park out across the street and away into suburban New Brighton. Even through the sedan's filters, the air felt like a patchwork of moisture and dryness, dense here and sparse there. More constant was the heavy silence. No birds, no traffic, few onlookers covering their noses and keeping their distance. Mira and her 2 rookie agents circled the park without words. Against her own wishes, Mira registered the individual faces of the fallen agents and kept tally of their number. Too many. Agent Zachary, Field. Agent Aaron, Field. Agent Pentikoff, Medic. Agent McMartin, Field. Agent Schmidt, Dispatch. Agent Larson, Field. Too many. This was information she did not want to know. These points of data would catch in her mind like burrs. Infinite branching possibilities all collapsed into none. This jagged knowledge would become a permanent trap, yielding no answers, nor ever growing smooth. But Mira could not bring herself to look away. Every life deserved more than to be a statistic. They could endure as her own haunting thoughts. She deserved no better. It did not take long to circle the area, and the carnage had taken place mainly across one street. But the tour of destruction and death felt as though it lasted hours. With their circuit complete and Mira's abhorrent manifest as complete as she could bear, she drove on toward the church and its newly hidden graveyard.
What are we doing here?
There's something we need. Agent Wilker, with me. Agent Duncan, stay in the car. We'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, guess I'll just stay. What the shit? Where'd they... Oh, yeah, don't tell me. I only helped build it.
What the... Oh, this is Friedman's Dolus prism, isn't it?
That's right. He said the more power going in, the larger the effect. So I'm going to need you and Agent Duncan to rig this to run off the car's battery, or its alternator, whatever it takes to cover what we saw. And if possible, keep covering the cemetery.
What about you?
There's something else you need to know. We saw a lot of bodies today, but none of them were engineers. Nobody from the lab. I know Agent Duncan is your friend, and I have no reason not to trust him. All I mean is, be careful. When in doubt, be honest.
Honest?
Honesty is a superpower.
Right. Or kryptonite. Present for you. Is there room back there?
Yeah. Here, this part actually, it slides in.
Nice.
I'm sorry to have left you, but we best be quick about this. I imagined you figured out what we have in mind.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem, as long as we have some wire. Oh wow, cross country, huh? Okay. Do you have jumper cables?
She's got cables, a fire extinguisher, a spare tire. You wouldn't believe how full the trunk is.
It would be irresponsible to drive around in a vehicle loaded with highly combustible fuel, a vehicle literally powered by repeated combustion, and not have a fire extinguisher. Besides, Agent, this is exactly the day and exactly the situation when you want me to be overprepared.
That's... Okay, yeah, good point.
What do you think? Somewhere around here? Will the field be large enough to cover the street and the cemetery still?
It should be.
All right, then let's start setting it up. What do you need me to do?
After popping the hood, some careful maneuvering, and the deployment of his trusty Swiss Army knife, Agent J. Duncan got to work. Minutes later, J and J had bodged together the means to hide both a gruesome scene of their newly killed coworkers and a graveyard full of long dead people who didn't stay put. Wilker reflected on his old partner's advice, the need to view this work in an abstract way. He wondered if this is what he'd meant. It certainly helped to think of this as just another electronic trick, like stealing cable or circumventing the region lock on a game console. Both Jays were pleased by their effort's success, but unsettled by the greater scope as it settled in.
Hang on. How's this even working?
You tell us. I thought you helped to complete it.
I did. It's supposed to work by bending a certain portion of the energy field emitted by, 17, right? Piggybacking on how it would create illusions or tricks.
So that's what you were talking about.
But if it's gone, and it sure seems like it is, then how come the field is still here to bend? There must be some kind of residual effect, but I have no idea how permanent it might be. Even assuming we keep gassing up and recharging. Hey, Commander, are you alright?
I'm starting to dread that expression. What is it?
Both of you, give me your pagers. Duncan, you're sure that the order did not come from Alpha Division?
What? It definitely... no, someone at Alpha would have to have somehow forged the fact that it was forged.
Yes or no? Are you certain?
No. Maybe with some more time.
We don't have it. Either way, any time now, Alpha is going to be here looking for me. They could be a friend or a foe, but that's for me to deal with. This wasn't supposed to fall on you two, but we're out of options. 17 has escaped, and the caretaker family may be in trouble. Help them if you can. Also, there's
Commander?
information I shouldn't have, and I've never shared it with anyone. I've made some poor judgments lately, and I hope this isn't another. Before the local family, there was another family connected to 17. A family in the Dakotas. More accurately, a tribe. I need you to find the Lower Sioux and tell the elders in person that Wendigo has escaped.
Wait, I have to write this down.
Do not do that. Please.
Lower Sioux, Wendigo, got it.
Look for any other survivors, but don't expect to find them. If and when Alpha Division finds you, well, try to put that off until you've seen the family and talked to the Sioux. But when time comes, use your kryptonite.
Huh?
She means...
Wait, where are you going?
Check the glove box.
What the hell? Where is she going? What's happening?
If she says Alpha's coming for her, I'm guessing that's what's happening. And like it or not, you and I have a job to do.
Job? What job? I highly doubt we're ever going to see another paycheck from this place.
She just told us what our job is, the family and the tribe. As for our paychecks, my guess is...
Come on, there's no way she was prepared for all this. She had our checks in the glove box?
Well, yes and no.
Big fat envelope of cash. Well, alright then, see? That's just not right.
Seems right enough to me. These are hundreds.
No, I just always figured if you and I ever got wrapped up in anything this sketchy, it would be somehow my fault.
Mira periodically looked back over her shoulder as she walked, leaving her fragile, hastily communicated contingency plan in the hands of two young men. Once she was beyond the scarred edge of hidden oaks, she saw exactly what she hoped to when she turned. Nothing. To her eyes and any others, there was only a field of tall grass surrounding a patch of young woods. A pond surrounding a small island was easy to make out. The wreckage and body count of her failure, and more importantly, the J's and her thin hope for a silver lining, were cleanly obscured. Mira looked down at the papers in her hand. The whereabouts of their respective agents would be among the first questions Alpha would ask, regardless which direction the leadership was taking. As part of her brain began assembling the most plausible timelines with the fewest misleading details, another part began working through various possible repercussions of flatly refusing to answer questions about either agent. She juggled ideas of how she might get a message to or from Agent Wilker, or even to the Lower Sioux from a position of stripped-down access or from a prison cell, or from Alpha Division's holding facility, about which she knew next to nothing. Despite the smell of a broken sewer, there had been a handful of people out gawking at the devastation. Some were not far from the illusory veil. Even from Mira's distance she could read their confusion. Some fraction of her concurrent lines of thought envied them. Before long, just as she expected, nondescript black vans appeared, closing in on the park. Onlookers were collected up by agents dressed just like her. Less than a minute after the first of the vans appeared, one rolled to a stop alongside Mira. In a sense, her job had already ended. From her point of view, however, she had a great deal more to do. The van's door slid open and she was summoned inside. Nobody in the vehicle spoke. Talking would come later. As they drove away, Mira saw through the tinted window a signpost whose edge seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Keep off the grass. Soon afterward they were out of town, and the road went from smooth to rough. She couldn't believe how good the air felt. It didn't have the diablerie twinkle of the forges or the other hidden worlds, but it was lively and fresh. It was not sterile and circulated like the cramped staleness of her cage she had known for too many seasons. Sadly, she couldn't savor her freedom appropriately. The humans had violated their promises, which she had expected they would. They were on her doorstep the moment she stepped out of the woods. They were lined up like little soldiers from a painting, dotting the road, hill, and lawns like decorations. She laughed at them through her moving cloud. They were slabs of meat on the butcher's block, asking to be trimmed. The emerald hawk moth obliged this slaughter, raining nuts, bolts, screws, propellers, fiberglass, plastics, and aluminum alloys upon them. It had killed most of them, which would suffice for the time being. They wouldn't give chase. It would be futile. They didn't know or have anything that could harm her in this state. The humans had lost their leverage the moment Simon died. Now, she was free and being followed by a green tempest. To some onlookers nearby, it looked like a tornado that refused to form. To others, it was a swirling drain, a hole in the sky that nothing could fill. But for everyone that day in her path north towards the Mississippi River, it was a nightmarish coupling of the hallucinatory and the impossible. 6 blocks away from Hidden Oaks, Brenda was doing her dishes. She was staring out her kitchen window just above the sink. Outside was her backyard with a solitary playground made up of a red slide and 3 swings. She could hear the thunder between suds of soap, clanks of porcelain, and the scratchy scrub of her yellow sponge. The air smelled of dial dish soap and warm water. She was tall, pale, brown-haired, with curly hair cut above her ears in gray-licked ringlets. She had an older face, no chin, and tired brown eyes. Her hands were covered in pink gloves that were glistening with a sheen of cleanliness. Brenda heard a strange sound beyond the bustle of her cleaning. It was a whirring sound. A navy blue minivan went spinning through her yard, crashing into the playset, shattering her brown fence and wrenching up the earth in a foamy brown streak. Brenda screamed. The whole action was so absurd it reminded her of a show she watched with her grandson called Samurai Pizza Cats. The vehicle's trajectory had left it upside down. It had a squiggle of smoke rising above it. The windows were crumbled like candy. There were dents everywhere. The tires had been melted off. "What in God's name was that?" she said, astonished. 4 blocks away on the main drag of Silver Lake Road, Jacob had just stepped off the bus. He worked downtown at the U of M Twin Cities tutoring department. He was long-limbed, balding, with narrow glasses, with a peachy complexion, and blue eyes sitting far back into his face. He hated walking home on stormy days. The clouds looked menacing, and the wind was turbulent, but there was not any rain falling. He was wearing a forest green sweater, khakis, and a black backpack where he kept his Magic the Gathering cards. He was hoping to try out a new deck on his roommate and had spent his break at work refining it. His path led him next to a liquor store, coffee shop, and a Hollywood video where he was about to stop in and pick up an 80s action movie to watch with his friends this weekend over a butter-twinkled bowl of popcorn. As he approached it, the air around him appeared to curl over in a vibrating ripple. It reminded Jacob of the explosions from those films in high school history class of nuclear weapons being tested in the Pacific, only the blast was all around him and without a bomb or weapon. The shockwave threw him into the front door, squeezing his lungs and partially knocking him out. Glass shattered in cars, stores, and offices. Even the lenses in Jacob's glasses were smashed. A clerk from inside the store dashed out to help him to his feet. He was wearing a Star Wars shirt with Chewbacca on it. He had long yellow hair with dirty strands closer to his scalp. He helped Jacob to his feet. "Dude, did someone drop a bomb on us, bro?" he asked. About a mile away, closer to Central Avenue at Moore Lake, Ryan Anderson was taking his son fishing for the afternoon. It was the one day of the week he would see him. His ex-girlfriend was barely okay with that scant amount of time. Ryan was angry, violent, impatient, and constantly huffing chemicals. He was tan, portly, blue-eyed, and had a head shaped like an apple. His nose was crooked. He had broken it in a fight at a gas station a few years back. He was dressed in a Twins jersey and jean shorts that dangled past his knees. His son Ross was 8 years old, dark-haired like his mother, but had azure eyes. Ross's mother always called him Superman, especially before hanging out with his dad. Ross didn't like his father at all. He was like some sort of ogre that would occasionally wander down from the mountains in a fairy tale. Ryan had stolen a reddish-brown canoe out of someone's backyard in Blaine where he lived with his parents. When they arrived at Moore Lake, which was a polluted disk of water and goose feces, an onlooker yelled at them that they couldn't use canoes here. Ryan told him to shut up, or else he'd break his jaw and shit down his throat. Then they paddled out, stopping between the beach and Central Avenue, which crossed the water in a raucous bridge of growling engines and whining tires. Ross pointed out the severe weather to his father, but Ryan wouldn't look up from a magenta jig he was trying to tie onto a strand of fishing line, which was thrashing wildly in the wind. The canoe suddenly jumped upwards, causing Ross to stand up. He was wearing a life jacket. His mother insisted he take one. "The fuck?" Ryan said as he looked over the wooden edge of the canoe. There was a massive fish, twice as wide as the boat, casually gliding by. It looked like it was made of stone. Its layered form resembled rows of organic monoliths instead of scales. At the tip of its jaws was a tangle of glowing teeth which seemed to radiate like a captured sun in the murkiness of the suburban lake. Ross screamed and sat down violently, clutching the canoe's sides in the slim hope it could protect him. Ryan quickly began rowing back. "Shit, that sobered me up," he said, afraid to look anywhere but the line of sand and cars along the shore. Further down Silver Lake Road, where it meets Highway 10, Devin was driving to the Barnes & Noble by the Northtown Mall. He was black, tall, with a thin beard along his face that was trimmed down to accent his cheekbones. He was wearing a red flannel with a white shirt beneath it. He needed to study for a British literature exam focused on Le Morte d'Arthur, but if he were at home, he would be distracted by Heroes of Might and Magic 3 or Saga Frontier. Since his commute started, he had noticed the tempestuous clouds with dark bends of jade. There was no rain, though, and he felt confident he could outrun the storm to the bookstore in his candy apple red Dodge Stratus. He paused at a stoplight just outside a car wash and Italian restaurant. The sky seemed to sink into darkness directly above him. All light appeared inked over, like the daylight was nothing but a row of lights in a cavernous warehouse and could casually switch on or off. In front of Devin's car, a small group of people crossed the road. They appeared to have no skin, hair, or clothes. They were only silhouettes, vague outlines of figures like shadows without the shape that had created them. Instead of walking, they floated. The way they drifted made Devin push his body back into his seat. He tucked his hands beneath his thighs and jammed his feet into the gray floor mat. One of the shapes turned to look at him through the windshield. The view outside the glass suddenly flashed into a strange set of ruins with pillars and crumbled walls smudged by moss and ivy. Sunlight had returned in a blinding wall of golden rays and glowing blue. There were people sitting, leaning, and standing by the fragmented structures. Devon squinted his eyes to make out their details, but the image evaporated in snakes of slithering green energy, leaving him back on the road where he had stopped, minus the storm clouds. A truck laid on the horn behind him as the light sat green. Devon gripped the steering wheel and tried to focus. There was more honking. I'm going, he said. About a mile away from Devon, Joan was leaving the brown-bricked Anoka County Human Services building, which was huddled on a street by University Avenue. She had just turned in a heat assistance application for the coming winter. She was short, gray, and dressed in a red winter coat despite the heat and humidity of the day. Her hair was frizzy and pointed, making her look like a hedgehog without the spikes. She had sunglasses on, which obscured most of her face except for her narrow mouth that was tugged back in a content grin. She was walking home to her beige Rambler close to the highway when she noticed the storm sitting atop the trees and rooftops. She couldn't focus on what was above her for very long because a different maelstrom was happening directly in front of her. Coming towards Joan, dashing along the sidewalk, lawns, and streetlights was every type of animal imaginable. Deer, rabbits, foxes, badgers, squirrels, chipmunks, mice, possums, and raccoons were weaving by her in snarls and cries. Birds followed, filling the air, beating their pinions in a frenzy and disorienting Joan's eyes so she could not see ahead of her. The squawks, thrills, and cries of their clouds scrambled Joan's equilibrium. She shielded her head with her forearms and fell backwards. By the time she calmed herself, there were only feathers hanging against the wind in lonely twirls. Then she noticed the street. It looked like a river had formed between the curbs. The substance was black and tendrilled. It was insects, millions of them, all shapes and kinds, scrambling by and following the horde of panicked life. They bubbled as they moved, a slimy parade of shells, mandibles, and antennas. In just seconds, they passed, like they had never been there. "What the hell is happening?" Joan gasped. Further up Highway 10, closer to Coon Rapids, Gabriel was helping customers get inside the bathrooms at the mini-golf course where he worked as a cashier for the summer. He was broad-shouldered, Hispanic, with a thin mustache laced over his lip. His hair was spiked with a plethora of gel, and he was wearing an orange polo with the words Lilliput embroidered in cursive on the left. When the weather turned, his boss asked him to shepherd the few customers off the course while he looked at the nearby bumper boats. The wind was pugilistic, battering and tripping him as he raced between plaster windmills, alligators, bridges, castles, gorillas, and dragons. Gabriel knew every turn, twist, and shortcut. He reached the end of the course, which was bordered by a black fence with spikes like toothpicks. When he got there, it looked different to him. There was an opening amongst the pastel caricatures. A depressed and empty brown circle stared up at Gabe from the artificial grass. A T-Rex, one of the last holes of the course, was gone. Gabe blocked the wind with his elbows and looked around. Something heavy echoed across the street from Gabe, towards some white office suites tucked behind Lilliput. A lumbering shape was moving between trees, rocks, and sidewalks, heading towards some woods just beyond the quiet buildings. Gabe could only discern the tip of its long, purple tail rising and dropping in thundering stomps. He looked around for someone to verify the anomaly. "Was that the fucking dinosaur?" he asked against the din. Blocks away at Coon Rapids Dam Regional Park, Serena was happy to be playing hooky from work. She had snuck away from Dairy Queen complaining about a headache. She parked her car in a row of empty spots just outside the dam and its long steel tongue of a bridge. Serena was 20, thin, green-eyed, with a curtain of blonde hair she used to hide her face and its expressions. She would be heading to the dorms of St. Olaf in just a few weeks to study biology. Serena shook her bare feet back and forth on the gray dashboard as she read the Fellowship of the Ring for the 12th time. Even though the sky was dark with roughness, there was a blue glow lancing through the windows in thick beams as she read. The sour and oily stench of the river was gone, replaced by a burning odor that reminded her of a stalled car. There was a sizzling sound, too, like a strand of electricity was marooned outside of a power line. The noise grew deafening, and she opened her door to find 3 large blue flames sitting above her. They were slowly rotating in a circle. Inside of them was some sort of window to another place. A prairie, curved fields of amber, and a winding river walled in by reeds. And then, as if the flames noticed her, they paused. The image vanished, and they hovered over the concrete walkway leading to the trail across the dam. Serena gasped at what she saw beneath them. It looked like a light was flickering in flashes, only there was no color in it, just pulses. Between these vibrations was a shape moving. It was tall, spiked, wide, and shrouded with some sort of dark fabric that simulated the environment around it. There was a hood, too, and below it a variety of bones dangling from threads. Serena's eyes started to water. She couldn't stop her hands from shaking. The figure made her body betray itself. "Why am I seeing this?" Serena screamed, bashing her head on the steering wheel. Then, as quickly as the form had appeared, it was gone. After she crossed the river, the storm finally dissipated. The containment had riled her powers, unleashing them as a mystical hurricane, one so powerful even she could not pinpoint its start or end. She wanted to move inconspicuously away from Hidden Oaks, but the hidden forges were igniting her forces. The emerald hawk moth had hovered over her during the journey, hiding itself by matching the color of the clouds and scouting for any meddlesome humans trying to interfere. They had missed her while she was imprisoned. She was certain there was no one else who was going to interrupt her, but the secret fires needed more convincing. They listened to her, but also lived for themselves as well. They could sense time happening all at once. Something in the future must have been rattling them. What did they know? She wondered. It did not matter presently. After all this time beneath the ground, drinking the dreams of others and living through bugs, birds, and cats, she was free, completely and utterly free. The bell tinkled as the front door of the Sunex Gas & Go opened. Patrick had just finished working the last shift before the store temporarily shut down for business due to road closures. "We're closed. Can't you read the sign?" Patrick growled as he rummaged through items stacked haphazardly behind the counter. "Hello to you too, Patrick. Geez. Disgruntled much?" said the denim-clad, lanky redhead in a leather cowboy hat that was so black it made his pale skin appear nearly translucent. The clerk looked up and saw his friend standing in the early morning sunlight that was streaming in through the front windows of the store. Dust motes lazily trudged through the air around him. He smiled at Patrick. "Oh, hey, Bob. Sorry. I'm just sick of people walking in here when we clearly aren't open right now." Patrick stood amidst an array of buckets, fire extinguishers, blankets, and other things scattered all over. As Bob looked around, he noticed similar items were stored at various points throughout the store. "Good Lord, Patrick, this is getting a little ridiculous, don't you think? Your fear of fires, I mean. Being prepared is one thing, but doomsday prepping is another." "It's a bad time, Bob!" shouted Patrick. "The whole neighborhood's going to shit. There's fires and weird fucking disasters everywhere. Don't tell me it's not warranted. You should see the shit that goes on here at night. We aren't even going to need this stuff here anyway. Mr. Schaefer said he's closing the store while this area is under quarantine, and he's making me the manager over at his other store by Otsego. I'm really fucking stressed out, man. This is like moving and changing schools as a kid all over again. Only worse. But that's why I asked you to come, to help me move some of this stuff over there." Just as he finished, the bell above the door announced another customer. "We're closed! Can't you read?" started Patrick. But he stopped when he saw the open mouth and wide eyes of the Indian kid that frequented the shop. He was wearing a Secret of Mana t-shirt and jeans and stood frozen in the open doorway, as if his Chuck Taylors were glued to the floor, staring back at the clerk. "You know what? Fuck it. Grab your Mountain Dew and candy or whatever. It's on the house. I don't give a shit anymore." The kid looked at him for another second and cocked his head, trying to determine whether or not the clerk was serious. After Patrick gave another sharp gesture for him to go into the store, the boy dashed to the back refrigerators, followed by the candy aisle like a contestant in the final round of Supermarket Sweep, gunning for the grand prize. Bob and Patrick waited and watched from the counter while he did this. Bob dropped a few coins and a dollar bill into a jar on the counter. It had a paper label handwritten in Sharpie marked "Donations for the People's Responders of Bewilderment" on the front. It was nearly empty. The kid reappeared with 3 bottles of Mountain Dew and an armload of Crunch Bars. He stopped at the doors again as if to check that the clerk wasn't playing a prank on him. When nothing was said, the boy gave a quick thank you and power walked his way out of the store. "Well, that was generous," said Bob. "I'm tapped out," said Patrick. "Have you been writing? I feel like you're not. It seems like the less you create, the crabbier you get at the world. You know, I thought the weirdness of this place during the summer was going to help you out with your monsters and everything, but this plane crash shutting down neighborhoods and everything, it's a lot, man. It's totally understandable you're stressed. Maybe the change of location will be good for you. You can get away from some of this madness. Why don't we talk about doing some of those Greenland Diaries entries on my radio show? The Ram is always looking for original material like that, especially from a student." "I haven't been able to as much as I'd like," returned the clerk. "It would be nice to have a creative project to focus on." "Oh, these fucking dipshits, god damn it!" As the two were talking, a dark silver-gray Pontiac Bonneville pulled up to the gas pumps and stopped. The driver exited the car and tried to start pumping gas while the passenger remained in his seat. When he flipped the lever up on the pump, a chime sounded inside the store. Patrick, frustrated at how much time and energy he had to waste on people who couldn't bother to read a closed sign, stood in the window, fixing his unblinking gaze and focusing his internal ire like an unseen laser beam directly at the man. This was a tactic he had seen Mr. Schaefer use many times. The guy waited for the gas to be authorized. He tried canceling and starting the pump again, which made the chime repeat in the store. Patrick continued to stare. Finally, he looked into the store window and gave an irritated shrug with both hands as if to say, "What's the holdup?" Patrick, trying to portray as much sarcasm as possible by crossing his eyes and mouthing the word "duh," pointed sharply at the closed sign in the window. The man at the pump looked irritated and made a beeline toward the front door of the store. His gait was determined and his footfalls were heavy enough that Patrick and Bob could hear the crunch of gravel beneath his work boots from inside. He was a well-built young black man wearing sunglasses, a green flannel shirt, and khaki pants. As he approached, Patrick thought he recognized him as one of the black-suited law enforcement people that had been around all summer. Before he could connect the dots, the man was in the store and at the counter. "Hey, I know you're closed," said the customer. "I'm in a hurry and we have a thing set up with Schaefer already. Please, turn the pump on. This should cover it." He thrust his hand out toward the clerk with a crisp $100 bill that was so straight and fresh it appeared as if it had been printed only hours ago. Patrick took the bill and looked at the man for a second. His heart was racing. He was worried that he was about to be punched or at the very least yelled at, so this response from the man was a relief. "Yeah, fine," Patrick said, as he pushed the button, allowing the fuel to flow. "Thanks," the man returned as he hurried back to fill his car with fuel. Patrick was growing tired of the distractions. He just wanted to get his supplies loaded up so he and Bob could drive over to Otsego to drop them off. Then he could close up the shop more fully, and these illiterate dolts could rattle the locked door and then peer in the glass for a few minutes before blundering away to find some other store clerk to bother. Bob could tell that his friend was struggling with his worries about fires. Both at home and here, he had taken to keeping extinguishers in easy reach in every room. He had fire-retardant blankets, buckets of water, and a small supplemental oxygen canister in a case that he carried everywhere. He even started filling trash containers with jugs of water. He said his reasoning was that if a fire started in one of these bins, the jugs would melt and the water would start to put out the fire even before he knew about it. Bob bent down and fussed with some of the items in a stack. "Are you really sure you need all?" he began to ask when Patrick cut him off. "We went over this. It's not crazy. I'm buying it all with my own money anyway. What's the difference whether I have to use it or not? At least it's there just in case. Can we just get moving things, please? I didn't even say... Yeah, no problem, bud, replied his friend. The two began gathering items and walking them out through the storeroom to Patrick's van that was parked out back. After their second trip, Patrick noticed that the car had left the gas pumps. He took this opportunity to lock the front door and shut off all the lights, hopefully stopping anyone else from trying to come in. After several relays to the van, the clerk double-checked that everything was shut down and stored away as it needed to be for now. I think that's pretty much it. You're sure you have time to drive over there with me today to drop this stuff off? Asked Patrick. Yeah, I don't have anything going on. We can talk more about the show, too, on the way over, replied Bob. Well, thanks. I really appreciate it. Don't mention it, buddy, said Bob, and the two of them walked out through the storeroom. So what if instead of a journal, we reframe it like the guy's recording his daily entries into a tape recorder? The second the door latch shut, a flash even brighter than the early morning sunlight blazed down in front of the store. A brilliant sphere of orange-white flame bounced in from the sky and landed on top of the gas pumps. In jolly, arcing leaps, it danced between the two pump stations like a bouncing ball hopping from word to word in a children's sing-along video. It plopped to the ground and began to rush circles around the central island before rolling up to the glass front door of the store. It tasted a piece of gum stuck to the sidewalk outside, and then a sound from inside the building made it stop, startle, and burst off into the air from whence it had come. Just a sec, I forgot to grab my jacket, called Patrick as he came back into the store. He walked behind the counter and grabbed his brown canvas coat off the stool near the cash register. He stopped and looked around, his eyebrows furrowed. He turned his nose up and sniffed. For a second, he thought he smelled smoke, but it was only a fleeting sense. He glanced out at the gas pumps, then surveyed the store. Everything seemed normal. Just the scent of bleach from the floors and greasy popcorn and hot dog smells. No smoke. No fire. He shrugged and walked out the back door. The Hidden Oaks podcast is a collaboration between Patrick W. Marsh, Robert Dawn, and Owen Swerkstrom. The story, Fractions, written by Owen Swerkstrom. To the Hunting Ground, by Patrick W. Marsh. Last Shift, by Robert Dawn. The voice of Hidden Oaks and Agent Wilker, performed by Robert Dawn. The voice of Mira, performed by Robin Sand. The voice of Agent Duncan, performed by Philip Eiliff. Original music composed and performed by David Schwartz. Find more of his works at dtschwartz.com. Produced by Robert Dawn, Owen Swerkstrom, and Patrick W. Marsh. You can find out more online by visiting us at hiddenoakspodcast.com or by finding us on Twitter at Hidden Oaks Pod, as well as Facebook and Instagram at Hidden Oaks Podcast. Hidden Oaks is an Ironfield independent production. Thank you for listening to Season 2. We're already hard at work setting the stage for Season 3, and we'll be taking a little bit longer of a break between now and then. But don't worry, stay tuned for plenty of behind-the-scenes, Q&A, and bonus episodes between now and then. Thank you for listening, and until next time.